Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Soldiers to Sidelines, Coaching Legends and American Heroes. For all of you who don't know me, I'm Harrison Bernstein, founder and executive director of Soldiers to Sidelines, and we have two awesome guests tonight talking about a fantastic topic. Tonight, we're going to discuss inclusion. And with us tonight is one of our Soldiers to Sidelines dearest friends, advisor, and last year's military coaching honoree at our Legacy of Leadership dinner, Colonel Greg Gadson, who played outside linebacker at West Point and went to serve the U.S. Army for more than 20 years in Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm, Operation Joint Forge, Operation Enduring Freedom, and Operation Iraqi Freedom. He attained his master's degrees from both Webster University and Georgetown University. On the night of May 7th, 2007, while returning from memorial service for two soldiers from his brigade, he lost both his legs and severely injured his right arm to a roadside bomb in Baghdad. Over the course of his military career, Gadson earned an extensive collection of awards, including 3 Bronze Stars and a Purple Heart. Since retiring from the U.S. Army, Colonel Gadson earned acting roles in the movies like Battleship and The Inspectors. He is a successful motivational speaker and has worked for several professional sports teams. 2 of his NFL leadership consulting gigs earned him Super Bowl rings with the New York Giants. Currently, Greg Gadson spends much of his time leading his consulting company, Patriot Strategies, practicing photography, and participating in several outdoor physical challenges, some of which we have been really grateful to cheer him on, and especially that bicycle ride from DC to Gettysburg. Welcome, Greg. So happy you're here.
Thanks for having me, Harrison, and welcome to everybody. Thanks for taking your time out of this evening to be here and to share. Thanks.
Awesome. And joining Colonel Gadson is legendary football coach Bill Curry. He was also a football player. And as a player, Bill learned the game from such legendary masters as Bobby Dodd, Vince Lombardi, and Don Shula. He snapped the ball as a center to a who's list of quarterbacks, including Bart Starr, Johnny Unitas, and Billy Lothridge. He has a 2-time Pro Bowl center, and he's a 3-time NFL champion, including victories in Super Bowls 1 and Super Bowl 5. As a coach, Bill Curry restored the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets to a national prominence. At the University of Alabama, where he was named the Bobby Dodd National Coach of the Year, Coach Curry led the Tide to an SEC championship and to berths in the Hall of Fame Bowl, the Sun Bowl, and the Sugar Bowl. He was also the head coach at Kentucky, where he led the Wildcats to their first bowl game in nearly a decade. In 2008, Bill became the first head coach at Georgia State, who played in its inaugural season in 2010. Bill's honors and awards include the 2007 Amos Alonzo Stagg Award, given for his lifetime work advancing the best interests of football, the 2008 Gerald R. Ford Legends Center Award, given for his lifetime of outstanding contributions, both within and outside the game of football, and the 2012 Intellectual Property Legends Award presented for significant contribution in the field of intellectual property and significant impact on one's peers in the community. And as a leader, Bill served as president of the National Football League Players Association during one of the most tumultuous times in NFL history. He was later the chief operating officer of the National Consortium of Academics and Sports. And from 2006 to 2008, Bill served as the executive director of the Leadership Initiative at the Baylor School in Tennessee. Bill's counsel is treasured throughout the country by business and other organizations attempting to cultivate leaders from within their ranks. He's also an analyst and an on-air personality for ESPN. Bill was the broadcast equivalent of comfort food. There was nothing better for the true football fan, no surer source for the indescribable feeling of satisfaction and contentment. Indeed, all was right in the world of college football than settling into a plush, easy chair on Saturday night and hearing the unmistakable voice analyzing, teaching, but never pandering. He's also an author. He wrote 2 books. First one in 1977 called One More July, and then in 2008 he wrote a book, 10 Men You Meet in the Huddle. So grateful to have with us tonight Coach Bill Curry. Welcome, Coach.
Well, it's such an honor to be here, and I can't even describe how this makes me feel to be included with you and Greg and the rest of your staff and this incredible thing that you're doing. And frankly, I needed a refresher course, and I'm delighted you're making such progress and I'm honored to be on here with Colonel Gadson.
And we are going to talk about how you guys met because that's such an inspirational story. And tonight's topic is inclusion. And you know what? Both you guys are probably the example, the icon of what inclusion is. And we're going to start this thing off by watching a very short yet inspirational video that you created, Coach Curry, called Leadership in the Huddle. So everybody tune your attention while I share my screen here, and let's make sure that everybody can see this.
The football huddle is a metaphor for our culture, imperfect like all metaphors. In that huddle is a bunch of folks that are black, brown, white, red, yellow, liberal, conservative, Muslim, Jewish, Christian, Buddhist, and Hindu. We are slim, fat, short, tall, fast, and slow. We are analytical people, and we're impulsive people. We have some of the finest men on earth, and heaven knows we got a few rounders. We have been through the fires of Bear Bryant and Bo Schembechler or some such coach that knows exactly how to extract every ounce of our energy. Americans see all that and they resonate with it. They crave it. They take it and us into their hearts. The men who earn a place in the huddle have experienced the miracle of team. The training camp experience is unbelievable. It is day after day, week after week, 2-a-day, 3-a-day practices in the heat, often in 14 pounds of equipment. Many drop out, numbers thin, and everybody thinks about quitting. Trust me, everybody. For those who do stay, there is the opportunity to participate in the greatest team sport ever devised. It is the only sport in which every player needs every teammate on every play just to survive. We learn ever so slowly that our differences do not matter in the huddle. When we trudge in after each interminable workout, we know that sweat smells about the same on everybody's body. When we get busted in the mouth, that blood that trickles is the same color. Everybody's tired. Everybody's hurt. It is in this process that the miracle occurs. Men who've been raised to hate each other's guts become brothers. I've seen racists reformed. I've seen the most unlikely hugs after victories or losses. I've seen inner city kids invite country boys from the mountains to go home with them for Thanksgiving dinner, and I've seen those invitations accepted and reciprocated, thus changing parents' lives. Our players become brothers for life. It is what America is supposed to be, could be, might be in our best dreams.
I love that. Gives me chills. Coach, what inspired you to write that?
911. Most of us can remember where we were if we're old enough. The teams that I speak to now weren't born for 911, and I have to keep that in mind. But ESPN wisely advised us to begin to drive to our next assignments. They didn't allow any of us to get on an airplane on that Thursday, which was 913. Most people do not remember where they were on 913. That was September 13th, 2001. But I remember because I was driving to Birmingham, Alabama, where Alabama was scheduled to play Southern Mississippi, and we were going to broadcast the game, our crew, if it were to be played. The NCAA was holding meetings to decide whether or not to play the games that weekend because there was such a risk in assembling 75,000 people here and there all over the country when we were in a war that we didn't understand. We didn't even know who it was against or what might happen next. So we were told to take our cell phones and to wait for a phone call on the way to our assignments to be told whether to continue or to turn around and go home. So I stopped in Attalla, Alabama to get gas. Nice guy at the filling station. I walk in, he said, "Coach, we're going to play these games this weekend?" I said, "Well, I don't know, but if this phone rings in my hip pocket here while I'm in your station, you may be the first fan in America to find out." Well, sure enough, my phone rang and I was told, "Go home, we're not playing." Good decision. Well, I put all those crowds at risk when we don't know the opposition. So I walked back up to the front of the station and had about a 30-second conversation that I'll never forget. I said, "Hey, buddy, we got our answer. We're not playing." And he leaned over and looked me right in the eye. His jugulars popped out. His eyeballs bulged. Looked me right in the eye and he said, "Well, let me tell you something, Coach. In Attalla, Alabama, come Friday night, we're going to play football, whether y'all play or not, because it means a lot to us." Whew. Passion. I felt like I'd been slapped in the mouth. So as I got in the car to drive home, I said, "Lord, please help me." I really did begin to pray, and we were all really agonizing for the obvious reason that we just lost 3,000 plus people, and we didn't know what was going on. And it began to come to me when I wondered, why in the world did anybody care about playing a stupid football game on Friday night? Well, it began to dawn again, because I had thought this before, but Friday night is when America huddles. People sit together in the stands that don't sit together any other time of the week. And what happens when one of our sons scores a touchdown? We hug, we celebrate together. We don't stop to see what the pigmentation is, or are you the right political party, or do you go to the right church? That's our teammate. So we hug. Even the parents involuntarily get into it. Over 1 million children play high school football every Friday night. So it began to fester in my mind about the huddle, and that sequence that you just saw was the result. I wrote that for the National Football Foundation, and it has continued to be circulated, and I'm delighted, because that's the great stuff that football can do, and it's also what happens in combat. And I haven't been in combat, Greg has, and Greg understands those principles because he was a great leader of his men and women. And I'm just glad I had the privilege of finding somebody and getting to know him who has actually been through what real war is. But what we can do in our sport is that we can bring the community together really like nothing else in the culture today.
Thanks, Coach. Greg, what's your reaction to that when you hear Coach say these words? You know, what does the huddle mean to you?
Thanks, Harrison, and thanks everybody for being here this evening. This is really you all do a tremendous job of bringing some unique experiences to share. So Harrison, there's a lot of emotions that kind of run through me, but when I think first about my military service, we're coaches. I tried to be a coach as a platoon leader, as a battery commander, as a battalion commander, and what I will say is, I personally never got to pick anybody on my team, anybody on my huddle. And so that's why this topic of inclusivity is so profound, because the military gives us, actually they don't give us everything we're supposed to have. They never give us enough. They don't even give us what's on our MTO, and they expect us to get the job done. And so that already tells you that there's an expectation for you to get the mission done with less than they actually prescribe that you would need to do it. And so you can never afford to discount anybody. You can never afford to marginalize or minimize anyone. In fact, we need to maximize that. And so this is about creating environments where we don't have favorites, that we develop and uplift uplift all those around us. And I'll say one other thing on this. Coach Jim Young, which we many of us in here know personally and have played for, and to this day he said something that I remember him saying at practice. He says, "There's no such thing as a freshman mistake. A mistake is a mistake, and if I put you on the field, I expect you to perform." And so I translated that to my organizations. I mean, I said, we expect everybody to perform. There's no room to fail. And so that's the expectation that I held myself to, and I tried to hold our organization, the organization I was part of, for. So.
Yeah, you bring up a great point, how in the military you don't get to choose, right? Like, so Coach Curry, in football, we make cuts, we recruit, we select, right? And then once we select, then we prune, like, who does fail us, right? Like, who makes the freshman mistakes over and over and over again, and there's not a spot for you here on the team, and that's just accepted. But Greg, in your service, you don't really get to do that, do you?
No, I mean, unless, someone compromises their integrity, our values, and then they can no longer, we can no longer count on them, then of course we've got to take the administrative action to move them. But that's not the going in position. The going in position for me is, I'm here to see you succeed. I'm here to see you be the best, to be your best self. And so it's about having an environment, creating an environment of high expectation, and not playing the favorites, not paying. Everybody's gonna do their job.
And so, Coach Curry, is there a time in a player's development in football where you are stuck with everyone on the team? Like, we're not making cuts. Like, if you came out to play football, you're here. And if you have a roster of 140 players, you got to figure out something to do with them. Have you ever been in that or a situation like that? Maybe it's not 140, but 80 or 90, where you just kept everybody. And if not, is there a place, in an athlete's development to do that?
Well, there was once, and Greg knows about this experience. It was at Georgia State University, a university that had never had football. And so we started, and we literally did not have a football. To have a press conference, we had to send somebody to a sporting goods store to buy a football so we could hold it up at the press conference. We didn't have a chin strap. We didn't have an office. We didn't have a coach. We didn't have a locker room. And we began to recruit young men who wanted to come as an act of faith to be a part of this football team. And although I didn't promise them, I implied that I will not cut you as long as you're following our principles and giving us your best. And then I began to bring men to speak to them that I thought could register with them, could get in their heads and in their hearts. And the first one I called was Greg Gadson. And he came at least twice, maybe 3 times. I'm trying to remember, Greg. I don't know where you can remember how many times, but I know I bugged you every year to try to get you back to speak to our.
Yeah, I think I was down. Yeah. Well, you didn't bug me, Coach. It was an honor, and it was really neat. I know that one of the players, I actually got to see 1 or 2 of them that were trying out for pro teams, and so that really is kind of what warms your heart. So but I was down there at least a couple times, Coach.
Well, you knocked us out every time you came, and the way and Greg didn't. He's not into dramatic entrances, but when he made his entrance, and I can't remember whether you used crutches one time and then walked in the next time with artificial legs. I can't remember. I may be making that up. But when you made your entrance, by the time you got to the podium, you could hear a pin drop, and our men listened to every word you said. And I will never forget those experiences, and nor will I forget you going to all that trouble to get down here to speak to our guys. And you should know, yes, some of them played in the NFL, but virtually all of them graduated from Georgia State University. And that was the real objective. And they've had a pretty good football team for a while now. You had a lot to do with that, big man.
Well, we digress a little bit, but the common experience, a couple of them, Coach Curry established and began a football program that didn't exist. And when I was selected to command a battalion, I had to start one from scratch as well. I was the third guy that would sign into an organization. For those in the military, I said, we didn't even know how to get toilet paper. And so there's a tremendous, you just understand that that it really is about establishing sort of a culture of trust, a culture of accountability, and you just go about it. And so much of that was, for me, was based in football and how we treat people. We throw these terms of equity and inclusion, but how many, how do you live it? How do you live it? How do you hold yourself as well as everybody else accountable for it? And it's a lot of work. And but when you do it and you do it right, great things come out of it.
Greg, I want to hear your opinion on this, and Coach, maybe you can listen, and this will kind of start the dialogue. You bring up some really important words there, Greg, and this is all about inclusion, and you also talk about living it, right? And living equity, like what does it mean to be equitable? So talk to us about your thoughts on the relationship between equity, inclusivity, and fairness, right? How does fairness in your eyes fit in to these two other words?
Well, to me, fairness doesn't make everyone happy, and that shouldn't be a goal of you. At least I don't think that should be a goal. But I think fairness is about your authenticity and establishing honest and consistent relationships. And so, people, as much as they may not like what you have to tell them, when you're consistently honest and you have a trustworthy relationship, then I think that allows people to kind of truly process, maybe some information that they don't have. But I'm telling you, you leave a little daylight of inconsistency, you leave a little daylight of trust or some appearance of favoritism and inconsistency, then that's where the light creeps in, and that's where the uncertainty creeps in, and so look, no one's going to do anything perfect, but I just would not necessarily over communicating, but just communicating at the right times and again holding my subordinate leaders to that level of consistency, not perfection, but consistency. We're able to kind of do a good job of of keeping things together.
Yeah, the word that I'm hearing that comes to mind, or emerges from what I just heard you say was candor, right? Like being honest, right? And just being candid, and you can be, if I heard you correctly, you can be fair. And in order to be fair, you have to be candid. And that is part of being inclusive, right? Because we are consistent in how we're treating everybody. And that, I think, is also kind of touches on equity. Like it kind of all, comes together that way. Coach Curry, what are your thoughts about like how fairness and candor, mixes in with equity and inclusivity?
All that stuff is felt before it's articulated. Or maybe I should say it differently. It's felt every day, whether you articulate it or not. If you say it over and over and over again, you better live it. If you live it, you don't have to say it so much. It depends on your personality. But what registers as I listen to Greg speak, and there are certain people as they talk about their leadership and what's important and what inclusivity is and how it should feel, it makes you want to play for them, makes you want to be one of their soldiers. Other people you hear talk, it makes you want to run. It makes you want to go to the next room and not be associated with this person. Why is that? It's because we feel before we hear, and then we hear, and then we feel some more. And if we're together every day, a culture is established based largely on the dominant leader. And if you're going to be a dominant leader, your principles must be very clear. And a picture emerged in my mind, a memory that I'll never forget. It's the greatest halftime speech I've ever heard. I participated in more than 700 football games. So that's a lot of halftime speeches. We were in Detroit. I was a rookie with the Green Bay Packers. And the Packers were already being called a great team. Lombardi was famous for a lot of things, but his greatest attribute is he would not tolerate prejudice. No racism, period. Other teams in the league had almost no African-American players and bragged about it. That's just a fact of life. I'm not indicting anybody. I'm just telling you how it was in 1965. We had great leaders like Willie Davis and Herb Adderley and Willie Wood and people like that. But we were in Detroit. We were playing against the Lions. They had Alex Karras and Night Train Lane and all those guys. They were the only team in the league that were not intimidated by the Packers. And they were killing us. It's 21-3 at the half, and we're being murdered right there in Tiger Stadium, the old baseball field. And one of the Lion players trudging up the sideline, before, I'm not going to call his name, but he looks at Lombardi and he says, "How do you like that, you fat," I'm not going to say the other words, bleeping whatever, wop. And I thought, God will strike him dead on this spot. I was waiting for the lightning bolt. Never happened. He just kept trudging on by up toward his bench. The benches were on the same sideline because we were playing on a baseball field. I turned and looked at Coach Lombardi, and he smiled. And I thought, wait a minute. I thought you were supposed to be the baddest guy in the world. Why is the coach smiling? Well, then the gun went off and we ran in for the half. In those days, the NFL halftime was 12 minutes. It's 13 minutes now, unless you have the Super Bowl, and that's 4 hours halftime, whatever that was. Anyhow, we go in the locker room, and everybody's terrified because Lombardi was, again, very famous for his rhetoric. He could destroy you with his words. He really could. So we couldn't wait to hear what he was going to do to us. Well, he no-showed. He wasn't there. The 40 guys are staring at each other. 4 of us were rookies, and a bunch of those guys are future Hall of Famers. I mean, I thought people were going to cry because they were so scared of Coach Lombardi and what he was going to say to us. Well, finally, with about 30 seconds left in the half, he steps in he's standing in the dugout of the baseball team. He steps in the locker room, he looks around the room, and somehow he seemed to get eye contact with all 40 men, and he delivered the greatest halftime speech I've ever heard. He said, "Men, we're the Green Bay Packers. And he turned around and walked out. Now, I will let you guess what happened in the second half. We ran them out of the stadium. And years later, I figured out why Lombardi smiled. Because he knew that the Lions players thought the game was over. But he knew his team. He knew what he had ground into our hearts and minds. He knew the culture that he had established in our brains, because he didn't have to repeat all those adages that you've heard from him. He had hammered them into our brains, and all he had to do is to remind us of who we were. And that was the greatest halftime speech I ever heard. And that's what great leaders do. They establish a community, and they establish a culture that everybody understands, and you choose to be a part of it, or you choose to not be a part of it. And your choice is very obvious, not just to the leadership, but to everybody on your team. And when you have that, you're very hard to beat.
Coach, when you heard that speech and now you're reflecting on it, those were very few words, but very powerful. How much of that power was accumulated in the silence leading up to it? Was the impact of that speech the fact that he let the team sit there in silence and no-show and ruminate about all the adages over time? Was he giving you space in the locker room at that moment to feel a certain way, to hammer home the few words, "We are the Green Bay Packers"?
Well, I believe that great leaders, and there are only a few of those, he was one of them. Greg Gadson is another. Great leaders have an instinct, an intuition. There were plenty of times that Lombardi did not keep his mouth shut, and he would rip us up one side and down the other. It was like every day. But because he had done that, and because he had this magical judgment that only the great ones have, he knew when to hold it and when he didn't need to. And he, I believe, and I've never thought of the other part of your question is, did he reckon on the tension and the energy building in those hearts, in those, and there were a bunch of future Hall of Famers. So let's not kid ourselves. There were a bunch of great players in that room. That was the other thing. And they were embarrassed. And you really don't want to embarrass Willie Davis or Henry Jordan or Ray Nitschke or Bart Starr or Willie Wood. So that was part of it too. And he knew all of that because he had brought us there. And so the answer to your question is, I think he probably did realize what was going to build up. But it's the only time he ever did it. I was only there 2 years. I don't know that he ever did it any other time. He may have, but I don't know they ever got that far behind any other time.
It sounds like it was surgical for sure, like picking his moments. And Greg, I wanted to hear the story. I love this. Can you tell us the story about how you and Coach Curry met and how this relationship came to be, and what brings you on this webinar here tonight together?
Sure, Harrison. I was wounded in May of 2007, and in August 2007, the first time that my family and I had gone on a adaptive reconditioning trip, if you will, was about 3 months later. And Coach Curry, I was in a line out at a ranch one evening to, they were giving us the veterans and their families these Stetson cowboy hats, and I was in line, and I hear a voice behind me, and it's I didn't know who it was at first. It was Coach Curry, but I recognized his voice from TV, but I wouldn't turn around until I was sure I knew who it was, and when I did, I rolled up to Coach Curry and I said, Coach, you don't know who I am, but the last time that we stood on the same field was 17 years ago when Army played Alabama in the Sun Bowl, and I wore number 98. And like all good coaches, he says, I know exactly who you were. I mean, and I believed them. And you know, we began to talk, and for at least an hour, and it was very emotional. It was probably the first time, you know, it's natural to a coach. It was the first time that I really got to sort of spill my guts, but also still trying to figure out what journey was in front of me, what was ahead of me. And I you know, so I don't remember specifically what all the things I said, but what stuck with me was, as a coach, Coach Curry said, he said, Greg, or young man, he says, you have something to share with the world. Don't be afraid to share it. And then I guess about 3 weeks to maybe a month later, Mike Sullivan, who's here, a classmate who had visited me in the hospital when I was recovering, who also saw something in me that I didn't necessarily see in myself, you know, asked if I would be willing to talk with the Giants. I mean, I didn't have a speech, I didn't have anything that I necessarily knew to talk about, but you know, he asked me to do it and I said yes. And so, so it just sort of, it opened a door, it opened, you know, but I will say this, probably the most important part about me and communicating early on was, I was talking to myself as much as I was talking to any group. It was cathartic. It was me working my way through an unknown journey that I was moving ahead on. You know, like Coach talked about, like it's two-a-days. You wanted to quit. You wanted to give up. You know, there's a lot of unknowns that you deal with when I was in my situation. But you know, that quit, that character, that football player in me didn't know anything different but to press on. And the last thing I'll say, and it's fundamental to what I believe in my faith. You know, sometimes people say everything happens to you for a reason, and I honestly shy away from that kind of belief, because no God intended this to happen to me, but He gives us, but His Word gives us the ability to get through anything that this evil world, that this world can throw at us. And I come to that, you know, as a man of faith, as a Christian, that I had to be able to walk in darkness. It was those days as a football player, those days as an athlete, those days of just knowing that you can't give up, that resonated, that allowed me to kind of walk in the darkness, and allowed me to see and be open to Coach Curry, to Mike Sullivan, to Will Huff, to so many that are here. I mean, I'm Harrison, I don't remember the coach at Georgetown at the time, but I was I started grad school less than a year after I was wounded at Georgetown, and met the head coach there, which got me connected to this program. So it's our hearts being willing to be open that allows us to press on.
You just left us with some pretty strong words there that I think I want to reiterate. It's allowing our hearts to be open that enables us to press on. But this openness, I think, really relates to what you were saying about feeling it, what Coach Curry was saying about feeling inclusion, and then you don't even have to talk about it. In order to feel inclusive with everybody else, or to actually even feel to be worthy to be included into a group, a team, what have you, it's like your heart has to be open, right? And that's what I'm hearing from you. So I see you nodding your head like you're agreeing, and it's almost like not only do we have to have our heart open to let others in, but we have to have our heart open to allow ourselves to be let in, to be included.
Yep.
Coach Curry, what are your thoughts on this open heartedness and how it relates to inclusivity?
I've never heard the term open heartedness, but I like it a lot. And let me put it this way. I've seen a lot of guys with bad injuries, never as bad as the one Greg suffered, but very, very bad. And I've seen those guys destroyed by those injuries because they couldn't rally the courage, the guts, the faith. Greg refers to his Christian faith. I share that faith with him. And I know that God gives us the strength to deal with whatever we have to, but we have to appropriate it. And I've seen tough guys give up in the face of serious injury or serious setbacks, academic setbacks. You don't go to the United States Military Academy without being busted in the mouth academically 1,000 times. Same thing with Georgia Institute of Technology. So I've seen people defeated by these very difficult forces. And then I've seen people who seem to gain strength. And I imagine Greg could write a book about how God gave him the capacity somehow to gain strength and not only to not give up, but to press on and to do great things with his career in spite of what he had to deal with, and to do great things for a little fledgling football team in Atlanta, Georgia, by what he said to them and by the example of him simply showing up for us, showing that he cared about our men and the women that worked in our program as well. So I think it's a combination of all those things, but each of us has the capacity to use the courage that God has given us to go beyond what we think we're capable of.
Yeah. I hear empathy, with all this in this open heartedness. And yes, I did make up that word. It is the ness of being open hearted.
It's a great.
I think it's appropriate. It just
praise.
Yes.
You're busted, Harrison, for making up words there.
Oh, hang out with me longer. I got a lot of made up words here. And and we're going to go down.
We're working on the book. Therese, who I know Coach Curry has met, she's on the call this evening, and
oh, good.
We're hoping to get that book out this year around Veterans Day. So
wonderful.
Can you tell us what is the book? What's the premise of the book? And can we, make sure that our eyes are open to go ahead and purchase this book?
Go ahead, Therese.
Hi, everybody. I've met some of you, talked to Coach Curry on the phone, and Will Huff. We've had multiple conversations. The book is about Greg, and I was a producer at one time known as the Pentagon Channel, and met Greg as he was recovering at Walter Reed. And then when he started talking with the Giants, actually Chuck Schrutzman called me and told me about it. And I said, we have to write this down. So it's really Greg's story. We go back into his past a little bit and how he grew up and some of his experiences at West Point and on the football field and then through his career. But mostly it's from the time he was wounded until the present. All of the struggles in his family. His family's been wonderful and helping us put it together. So we found a publisher last spring, and Schaffner Press, and it comes out, I believe, right on November 11th. It'll be on Amazon. I actually had a meeting yesterday and today working on a website where we'll be selling it from also. So it'll be around. You'll know.
Have you?
You'll get tired of hearing about it.
Well, we're going to support for sure. I can't wait to buy it and read it. And I know everybody here will as well. Have you settled on a title yet? Because I know sometimes that's the last thing to get sorted out.
Yeah, I guess we can say, Greg, we're going to call it Finding Waypoints. Finding
Waypoints. Okay, so that's what we have to look out for, folks. Finding Waypoints, and we make sure we go on Amazon and, to support Colonel Gadson. Not only do you have to buy the book, but you actually have to read it, and then you have to go back on Amazon and write a review, a positive review, and that is the best thing you could possibly do to support Colonel Gadson. Is buy the book, read it, and leave a review on Amazon.
Harrison, I need to butt in for a second while Therese is listening, because Greg didn't tell the whole truth about when we met and why I knew who he was. I didn't know everybody on that Army team, but what I said to him, he turned around and said, "Are you Coach Curry?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "The last time I saw you was at the Sun Bowl. I'm Gadson." I said, "Oh my gosh, I remember you because you knocked our butt off every play all day. We hadn't blocked him yet. I mean, we were going to run the ball, and we ended up having to throw it and double him. He wouldn't tell you that. He was not only a great leader, he's a great football player. And frankly, when and again, I'm not just making this up to make him feel good, but I think it's maybe something else that if you want to use it in the book, you can, Therese. But when you have put so much stock in your ability to play that game and you become a great player and you're a great player, and when that is utterly taken away from you forever, possibility of running out there with your children or anything, that destroys people sometime. And instead, it made Greg stronger.
So guys, what made you stay in touch, then after this moment? So, there's this mutual respect that you have, and, Greg, you summoned the courage to go over and approach Bill and Coach Curry. You acknowledge, Greg, from his prowess on the football field. But like so many interactions that we all have day to day, you see someone that you admire or you have these interactions, but you guys have formed like a strong relationship that has endured ever since then. So, I can see, it seems like you guys are like kindred spirits, like the examples of inclusion and the way you just look at the world. But how did the follow-up happen?
Selfishness. Pure, not pure selfishness, but almost. I just wanted him in front of my team. I wanted them to feel and taste and understand what greatness feels like, looks like. And I'm not trying, I hope I'm not embarrassing you, Greg, but, and it worked. I mean, they got it. Good gosh, look at this great man. And he comes down here just to talk to us, and we're nothing. We hadn't even played a game yet. Um, it was a powerful statement to them. And I guess I hoped it would be. I didn't know it would be as powerful as it was, but it was a gift from Greg to us. And it's not something that any of us, and the hundreds of us, however many times he came, we will never forget it.
Harrison, for me, it's those of us who have played sports and can identify that those handful of coaches that they just touch your heart. I mean, they're almost like they're like your parents. They could replace your parents. They're part of your parents. And Coach Curry is that such a man. A man of first, a man of faith, a man of character, and you just want to be around. I mean, you learn something. He doesn't even have to be talking to you. You can be talking to someone else, and you're going to get something about life. You're going to come away enriched by being around him. And so I say selfishly, it was, I was never gonna, shake him. I mean, he is, we've run into each other in airports and Atlanta. I mean, just all kinds of ways. And it's, one adjective we haven't really, but Coach Curry is a gentleman. He is a rare, I can say, just an absolute gentleman, a kind soul, and the kind of person you want to be around, and that I would aspire to. So
awesome. And I never do this, and because I just don't like putting people on the spot who might not be ready. But as I hear about these speeches that you give, Greg, and how greatly it affected Coach Curry and his Georgia State team, and we know about what you did with the New York Giants and how you ruined my season because I was coaching for the Redskins in 2007 when you guys went ahead and won that Super Bowl, thanks to your speech. But Mike Sullivan, Coach Sullivan, you're here tonight. I'm putting you on the spot. I don't normally do this, but if you're willing, would you unmute yourself and can you speak to how did the team, like in the moment, receive Greg's message when he spoke?
As I listened to Coach Curry and him describe the effect that Greg's speech had on those young men and women at Georgia State, I tell you, it very, very similar to what happened that night in Washington, D.C. Coach Coughlin was someone very authoritarian, very similar to what you hear about Coach Lombardi. No one ever spoke at the team meetings. He did all of the talking, and he would go through step by step. And at that point, we're 0-2, getting ready to play Washington, and it's not looking very good for us. And, I got the opportunity to introduce Greg, and I'm, of course, very nervous. I mean, talking in front of the team, man, that's no big deal. But I wanted to do Greg the honor that he deserved in trying to introduce him. And when I'm up there, the players are looking at me like, well, where's Coach Coughlin? What's going on? And I introduced Greg, and just as Coach Curry had mentioned, you could hear a pin drop. And these are grown men, talented, the top best athletes in the world, very rich, very, fill in the various adjectives. And yet they were so touched and so gravitated by Greg's spirit and his courage and his resolve, and yet the humility to share his story and to talk about how proud he was, for example, of the young soldier who had just went to combat lifesaver course, wasn't really a medic per se. He had allocated his medic to another one of his batteries. And to hear Greg talk about that and to share his story, I mean, you could just feel and see these men, some of them get very emotional. It's something even just recalling, here was over 15 years ago, I still got the hair on the back of my neck standing up right now, just reliving it. It was a very, very special, memorable night that I will never forget. And I'm sure the men that were in that room won't forget either.
Well, thanks, Coach, because I was on the other sideline, and I won't ever forget it either, because we just got our butts whooped. There was that. But these are great stories, and you hear about this impact, right? And that's what this is all about. That's what Soldiers to Sidelines is all about. It's the ripple effect that these messages and these interactions have. As a service member, as a veteran, as a coach, and Coach Colonel Gadson talking about how he approaches his leadership, like as a coach. It's the impact we have on our players and those that we lead. And these players are now talking about these moments decades later that we all remember because they are such profound moments. This is the power of a coach. And if one coach can affect 50 people in a year, think about how this compounds as we develop thousands of future Greg Gadsons who would then develop thousands of future Greg Gadsons and Bill Currys, and how that can change the fabric of our country. And that's what this is all about. And that's why this discussion is important. It's about inclusivity and inclusion and bringing everyone together so that we can rally to become one nation and be, like Coach Curry said, we are the Green Bay Packers. We are Americans. And it starts on our ball fields. So, thank everybody for being here tonight. And before I turn it over for final message, just know, you can help. All these webinars and our services to develop coaches to become character coaches, it's free for service members and veterans, and it's only possible because of our sponsors and our donors. So if you're contributing already, thank you so much for helping. And if you're not yet, please join us. In fact, we have a legacy of leadership dinner where we honored Greg Gadson, and Coach Curry was there last year. We're doing it again this year, March 27th in Washington, D.C., where we celebrate this ripple effect of leadership. So visit our website, soldierstosidelines.org. You'll go under resources and see the Legacy of Leadership dinner. And if you want to join us for another in-person night like this with fine food at the Ritz-Carlton, DC, please go ahead and join us and purchase a ticket. And before we go out here, I've got to turn the mic back over to Coach Curry and then to Colonel Gadson to send us off on one final message. Coach Curry.
My message is in accord with the theme of my life now. I'm 80 years old. I played our sport for 20 years, and I'm still alive. And my wife says I'm not any dumber than I was 20 years ago. I doubt, I don't know that, I think she may be fudging that. I know what a blessing all that is. I know that in many ways, that's beyond the pale because so many of my teammates are not as fortunate. So my message is to each of you that is touching our young people every day with every word you say, every expression, the way you look at your people changes their lives. You look down your nose, you get in a staff meeting and use a pejorative name, some of those awful names we call players, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That gets back to them and they believe it. They also believe it when you tell them they can do it. And that if they'll stick with your system, it will work. And you will change their lives this very day and the next day and the next, because you're teaching them, you're showing them gratitude. And when you're 80 years old, they will call you on the phone and say, thank you, coach. And it's the greatest reward in our business. I never dreamed some of the guys that call and do that. And I share that only because it allows me to experience a kind of gratitude I did not know existed. And so that's the ultimate reward, and there is nothing better.
Words are powerful, Coach. Thank you. Colonel Gadson. Greg, you with us? Oh, you're muted.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Thanks, Harrison, and to kind of take the lead from Coach. You know, this word gratitude. Well, first of all, I have the utmost gratitude for my teammates here, my teammates that are not here, and all of those that have helped me get through a tough part of my journey. I truly stand on your shoulders. But as I kind of think about where I'm at in my life, it's never been more clear that our lives are not about what we can accomplish, what we can accumulate, but it's really the essence of being a coach. It's what we leave. It's who we touch. And every single one of us that's been touched by a coach that may or may not be here now knows that. And so it's an extension of our service. It's an extension, and it ensures that we live beyond our time on earth by what we leave, not what we take.
Thanks, Greg. Thank you so much, everybody, for spending your evening with us. I know it's late if you're here on the East Coast, but if you feel like I do right now, my heart is open, and I'm just so glad that we could all be here tonight. I hope everyone has an awesome night, and hopefully we get to see you in person at the Legacy of Leadership Dinner on March 27th in Washington, D.C. Good night, everyone.